Hi, I'm Ryan Jinks, and welcome to How Not To, where we have 800-ish videos, 5-ish ebooks, thousands of break tests, 7-ish employees, about 2,300-ish products in our new store. This is the story of how we became an overnight success in just 8 years. September 21st, 2016 is when I hit publish for the first time on something that I didn't know was going to turn into, one, me doing this full time, and two, a store and even a break test channel, because that's not how I started. I'm going to share with you how it turned into that by going over all the gear on the wall behind me. I think that'll make for a fun anniversary video. The in-depth store stuff, the store tour, now that we have a new location, the finances that I overshare and have no idea if that's a good idea. All of this is going to be a separate video because it would become too much, and I think the story of this is more interesting and more relevant to the anniversary video that I like to do every year. I don't even know where to start on here. This is going to be a lot, actually. I want to start with the timeline on how I started, why it's even called How Not To, which is funny. I wanted to make Highline videos. I wanted to make helpful videos because at the time in 2016, I was crushing it. I was doing good. I felt confident that I could rig anything I set out to rig. And I wanted to share that information because there was lots of information on YouTube about how to set up long lines and slack lines, but there wasn't anything about highlining. And a lot of the slackline companies would kind of not talk about it because it's where you would risk your life, and it was taboo. I understand, like, a company wants to be careful putting out information on telling you how to be safe for liability reasons. I mean, I sort of get it, and obviously I sort of don't because I share way too much on this channel. Nevertheless, I wanted to share how to be safe on a highline. And I also felt, what are the risks? And I was too cheap to hire a lawyer to find out if that was a good idea or not. And so this is how much thought I put into it. How not to. The disclaimers in the name. The only thing I regret is putting a K in the not. That would have been kind of fun. But I think How Not To still applies today because I do use gear the way you're not supposed to use it, and it basically fits everything we're doing. So that's why it's still called How Not To. It was originally called How Not To Highline, but we got rid of the highlining because we realized a lot of different sports we started dabbling in, which brings me into why we started doing that. I couldn't find the answers to questions I had about 10 videos in. And so I was like, well, I'm gonna go find out. I'm gonna go test this thing. I bought a ram puller. It's like a hydraulic, and you like pump the little thing, and like it pulls dents out of cars. It's 2 feet. You can't even get the slack out of a system with that. It's not strong, and then you're kind of like in the way of things breaking. And then I got a cable puller. You're literally cranking a cable puller with your face in line of the things flying towards you. Don't use a cable puller, by the way. And I realized that sucked. So I was like, what if we did this on a 2-to-1? And that way I'm out of the way. Well, when you start doing that, what you pull with is now reduced by half. You get twice as much force, but your throw is half, or the distance you can pull. Family friend of ours, they had some trees in their front yard. That's why the front yard looked like I was doing this in a park, and the trees were curved. And so I was able to build a 2-to-1 on a 2-to-1 on a 2-to-1 on a 2-to-1. It's still actually a really good idea. And then I pulled it with my van at the time. And that's how we were able to do a lot of the tests outside. Until that sucked, because setting up and tearing down started to become more and more of an issue. And we started to break test more and more things. Because I discovered that MBS was a myth. MBS has a fancy 3 sigma calculation for a 99.7% chance it won't break below that number in the best case scenario. You can still tell that I complain about that today because we don't use it like that, and that's the premise of the channel, why we're 5,000 break tests deep. But man, when I realized hard goods usually break what they say if you pull it mostly the way they intended, but soft goods, put in a web lock, put in a knot. You don't even get close to that number. Oh, of course not, it reduces the strength. It was like, I didn't know that. So that's where I was like, well, people need to know. Because I'm already in this, I want to help and teach highliners, new highliners things. Anyways, fell down the break test rabbit hole. And it sucked to do it on trees because we wanted to pull harder and harder things. And that's where Larry, who I lived with for a while, where I used the back of his welding shop as the lab. He originally built that aluminum machine that you see in so many videos for my house in Lodi, California. And it fit in my garage by accident because I meant for it to be, stupidly enough, out of my backyard because I'm so used to working outside. But like, it's either too hot, too wet, too whatever, right? Well, my friend who was helping me break stuff in the yard at the time, he's like, well, why don't you cut out your cabinet here and it'd be sitting next to your sink and then it would fit in your garage, man. You could break test stuff anytime you want. Yeah, that's why I ended up in the garage. That's why I ended up where it was in the garage. Because my friend Brandon brought that up. So now I have a 20-foot test bed and a Costco winch with an 81-to-1 with tractor supply pulleys. That's why it's obnoxiously loud in the videos. Pulling different things. And so then other people hit me up about, because I was a climber, before I was a highliner, hit me up about climbing gear, caving gear, and eventually canyon gear. And I was just like, there was so much crossover that I said yes. And it was fun to break it up, to mix it up with always just making highline content. Now, when I started, I wanted to be 1% better than the last video. Just a little better. I knew my videos sucked. I didn't realize they sucked as much as they do suck. Because at the time I was like, this is as good as I can make it. Which was. But I'd make it 1% better. 1% better, 1% better. Eventually they get better. But I never wanted to miss a Wednesday. And I never missed a Wednesday. Then I made like this whole video about how I'm not going to post so consistently because quality over quantity. And then I missed like one Wednesday. It was pretty funny. So trying to post new, fresh information every week leads you to kind of diversifying. Otherwise, if you're too niche, it can be hard to keep it interesting for the guy who has to do it every week, but also for the audience, which I think grew the audience. And I obviously don't make as much slackline content as I used to, but if I did make a slackline video, it would be a really good one that I would answer probably 10 times more in that one video than I used to. So I really don't have to make very many videos to put out the same amount of content. Now, having a test bed and a way to pull things is only half of what you need for brick tests. You need a way to measure it. And I was using a 50,000 pound crane scale, which still I use in the machine today, but that measures in 50-pound increments. It's not as detailed. It doesn't have any graphs and charts, and I kind of got in the weeds of load cells. I guess I'm pulling stuff off the wall already. I got to borrow Andy Lewis's line scale 1s for Equalization is a Myth video, which was very eye-opening for all of us, and then incentivized me to get line scale 2s, which we ended up using in many videos, and we were able to test stuff out in the wild, which led to the line scale 3. Because this couldn't remember anything, couldn't graph anything, it only read up to 20 kN, and we wanted that to read up to 30 kN. And the fastest this was reading was 40 hertz, which wasn't enough for the other popular video I did where we did falls in a climbing gym, and I released it right during COVID, so the video blew up. This is what we had on us. So I presented to my audience that this was an option, and we were able to crowdfund for this in 4 days. $350,000 for 1,000 units. And that was incredible. Feedback loop for me that my audience was very interested in this thing I'm doing. And being able to make these, because I invested in 7 of these myself, I don't own Line Grip. So this was awesome to have because now we could do a lot more tests I couldn't do before. And like a lot of YouTubers, I was doing all of this while I had a job. YouTube ad revenue is a myth. That is not enough money to make videos, let alone make a living for most creators. So I was a painting contractor for 20 years. I grew up in my family painting business. I graduated high school and went right into it. I did college on the side, but I did painting full time all the way up until I was 38. I think that's when COVID happened. And so that is roughly when my dad was retiring. I ran it myself for a while, and the YouTube thing was sucking so much of my time that I wasn't putting myself properly into the painting business. And so when COVID happened, the business did really well, not really bad. And so ironically, we stopped it. I sold my rental. I was hyper responsible for 20 years, just over the top. My rental, my house, and close the business down. Owner-operated businesses are not sellable. You have to have a self-running business for anybody to want to buy it. Otherwise, they buy a job, and most people don't want to pay for one of those. So I sold off everything, shut it all down, put it in the bank, sold my house, and then rented a room at Larry's so I could be flexible, not knowing what's going to happen next. It was really nice being able to rent the room from Larry because I still needed the lab. I still needed a place to break stuff, and we cleared off a whole section in the back of his shop that he wasn't using for anything but storing junk. And that's where the drop tower got built, is an area he wasn't doing anything with. With I-beams, he wasn't doing anything with. And so I was bootstrapping the crap out of this thing, trying to figure out how to make it sustainable, but also a solution in how we can answer every question anyone's ever had about the gear they trust with their life. Now the whole point of the channel, and it's been that way for a while. That is an ambitious goal, but I also get all the feedback. I know what kind of questions are being asked. I also know some people already know the answers, but like they're not easily Googleable, if at all. But there's a weird spot that information dies. Manufacturers do test a lot more than they share. A lot of it's R&D for new gear, and it's not in their best interest to tell you any more than they need to. And there's no money in testing a lot of this stuff if you're not making product. Not that there's a ton of money in climbing gear, but there's some people who do some tests and they don't have a platform in which to share it. There's no good central location for a lot of the things that I've tested. And so having built the platform or vlogging my struggle bus as I go has helped solve that problem while the information's simultaneously getting better. So now we study the crap out on how to get the information out. And no, it's not clickbait, it's vague bait. We'll get into that later sometime if you want. And also how to make the information as thorough as possible, but not make anybody fall asleep. It has to be entertaining. There has to be story inside of it. Science communication is an art. So post-COVID, living at Larry's, living on some residual painting. I can't say no to everybody. Some residual painting income, and trying to learn how to invest. And that's where I started a channel called How Not to Invest. Kind of vlogging what I was learning, but then I was like, focus is probably the next video I should make, and I can't make that video unless I live it, so I stopped making videos because staying focused on a task is the number one thing you can do when you invest in the S&P 500. Invest in yourself. It'll pay off. So the cost of the channel is mostly subsidized by donations all the way up to this point. And then we built a drop tower. And the drop tower was a lot more work to build than I thought. Everything is. But I learned a lot on how to do drop towers. Very important that I did that. It's interesting that the comments were, why did you go and build all of that and not do more drop tests? Well, ironically, the way drop tests are filmed is it's a 3-second event. If you're lucky, a 10-second reaction. Whereas a pull test, you can set it up, you can hold the camera right there, you can watch it pull, I can slow-mo it because I know where the product is gonna be when it blows up, whereas drop tests without tracks, all over the place. So to do a drop test is about 4 to 10 times more work per sample, and the footage is at least 10 times shorter. And so when we drop test, unless it was an entire episode about drop testing, then it didn't look like we used it that much. But we were probably 50-50 on time with the slow puller and the drop test. Not to mention bolt busters. Bolt busters is where we kind of basically strip the hydraulics out of the slow puller that we migrated up to hydraulics. And then we take it out to the wild, anchor down one side, and pull real bolts installed in real rock so we can see real numbers. We started in a driveway, and then we put concrete in my backyard, removed that when I sold it, and then went out to real rock. That was another series of stuff that we still do. It just, to do that, requires an absolute ton of setup, like a day of prep and packing, a day to set it up and design what you're gonna do, a day of cleanup, and a day to just organize the footage. For how many days of brake tests do you get out of that? Depends who can help you. They get pretty hard the more you try to bite off. I honestly can't believe I quit a perfectly good job. I didn't want to paint my whole life with only 40,000 subscribers. In hindsight, that's gutsy. Don't ever do that. Anyways, I won the girlfriend lottery and I moved up to Washington to redeem my prize. And at the time, while Andrea and I were first dating, I would fly back to Larry's and manage last bits of my life that were in California and go to Yosemite and do Dano, the swing. And it's like, but I would have to go there, batch film. Bobby would show up for a couple days, batch film. And then Bobby lives in California. And then fly back up here and sit in an apartment and edit for 6 to 8 weeks. That wasn't fun. Let's just put it that way. So in order to move a lab up here, a 20-foot test bed is pretty big. So instead of renting a shop, I just got a house that was big enough to accommodate a lab and also our life. And so we rolled up our rent and what would have been this rent into one, and it ends up coming out cheaper having a nice place to work that I could be shooting stuff like this when I probably should be going to bed right now. But that is why we redesigned the brake test machine that I currently have to have all the pistons underneath, 2 arborist pulleys coming up and pulling through. And so the top of the brake test machine does about 40 to 70, depending on how I set it up, kilonewtons. And then we got the big piston in a second chamber on the other side. And you can see that the brake test machines are getting more complicated and intricate because I know how I want to interact with the thing. And then to do drop tests, I found a tree on some private property that was leaning just enough to where you can lift the sample up high and not hit the line scale in the middle and have enough space underneath and all these things you need to know, which was super helpful for the drop tower, by putting a bolt through the tree like a Treehouse Masters style would do. And then we would connect the line scale 3 to that. And that's what you see in the drop test that we have here. And now it's a matter of just making more fancy fixtures that will be able to test different things inside of here, including, and what I'm most excited about, is bolts. Put little pipes in here and we can pull in shear and tension. And this allows us to test things that I want more of an isolated environment in order to test the new EP800 glue that we have. Some glue and bolts just to find out when the welds break. The problem is like the rock breaks. If I want to test a rock, I'll go out to real rock. If I want to test the bolt, I'd like to do it in here. The way ropes are tested at full strength is by wrapping it around several times around something that has more than 10x the diameter of the rope. And it does break in the back, the drum, and that is giving us full strength. Rate of speed is a whole different conversation. But usually brake test machines are on tracks, and so this can be mounted super stable and then get pulled up, whereas ours is free floating. And so we were able to find a way to balance the thing in the middle, pull, and have control over it, and be able to start testing MBS of soft goods. So trying to make the channel sustainable away from donations, which I appreciated, but I wanted to make it sustainable. So I tried partnering up with Extreme Gear and Rocky Talkie. Rocky Talkie turned out to be a good long-term thing, and I promote them occasionally, but they're in like the bottom of the description. 10% off if you use my rockytalkie.com/hownottocode code. But Extreme Gear did not turn out to be so good. I didn't understand what drop shipping was. The customer service dropped off, and then people were mad about not getting their stuff. And I was like, oh my God, I don't want to be associated with that. And now I'm just like, how do I, like, selling all the gear seemed to make a lot of sense because I can be gear agnostic. I don't care what you buy. Just buy it from the thing that provides income to this. Well, I didn't have that anymore. And it wasn't taking off because of the problems I just told you. So after 18 months of trying to make that work and then other stuff work, and you watch how many YouTubers try to make product. I don't make product, I unmake products. And so I thought, how hard could it be? Now, I knew it'd be hard, but damn, starting a store was hard. I got at least 2 years of experience in the last 12 months because I have worked 80 hours a week on it. But we're doing fantastic, and that is so much to go on in this video. I don't need to talk about the store. I just want you to understand it exists, and that's why. But that was nice to be able to start that out of my garage until we now recently outgrew that, until we are now in the Issaquah area in Washington, where the address is in the footer of our webpage, and you can do pickups after you order something online. blah, blah, blah. I would not have probably started the store if I didn't have the space, because I wouldn't have wanted to lease a place without the risk. I so badly want to make a channel that talks about business and how not to retail, because I honestly know more about that than I do about brake testing gear. Anyways, we're working on more machines. We have an abrasion tester that we're perfecting. The edges turns out to be the hardest part, not moving the rope. And we're going to try to make the science better, the storytelling better. And that's kind of what you saw in last Wednesday video where we tested the outward force on cams, where that one doesn't have a lot of samples in it, whereas I'd love to have 100 samples per video. But it has a lot of effort was put into understanding the math, the formula, different changes different cams had, and like really understanding so you could walk away with the fact that it's like 200% of the force outward as you pull down, and like also telling that in a way, in a story that no one forgets. They watch it and they like can remember that it's 2 times the force. And so we can build on that with other cams when the crack is not parallel, you pull sideways. But I don't want to touch on the topic, and it's a hard topic. I don't know any other videos on YouTube about it, so it's hard for us to do research on it. And so I don't want to put it out there unless it's really good. And so that 1% thing's kind of getting harder. That is a great way to describe that problem. I know what we can do, because I'll like pour myself into a video and I know it could get up here, but I still want to post regularly. I still think there's value in that. As long as I hit a metric of helpfulness, but also thoroughness is what I'm trying to add to this. And so we're doing things now that I will tell you about in 3 months that will potentially do that. But you can see the effort we put in to the last video was a lot. I had to go backwards to go forwards, right? So I got very distracted, talking about focus, starting a store without retail experience in an effort to go forward faster. Because now we're trying to create this economic engine that will help pay for help in the lab or help editing the shorts, or having the store also helps me be able to touch more gear, but that is a whole nother thing. The content gets better because of the store. But starting the store made the content kind of like, I'm not proud of all the videos I put out last year because I know they could have been up here. But I'm thinking I'm going to be pretty proud of what's coming out in 2025. Because we now have an economic engine that'll make that sustainable. Now, I nerd out about finances more than I do gear. I like business, and I like to share that stuff in an unconventional way. I way overshare finances in a video, typically every year, used to be more often. And that is to the people who sign up for my emails. Now, yes, I want emails. Yes, it's nice to have a direct connection in case the algorithm doesn't show you something, blah, blah, blah. Emails are great for business. I don't spam people with them other than newsletters on Saturday, which I'd value. Caveats. But the reason I put my finance video behind the email wall, nothing's behind a paywall, is because if I add a little bit of friction, I feel like I can overshare. There is no scientific basis to that. I just feel like random strangers are less likely to come across that video, and not everybody who probably gets access to that video likes me, but I still feel like I can overshare about my personal finances, lab finances, and store finances. And I can't do that in a short video because we now move like millions of dollars in gear. Now, it all goes through my fingers, so context, but I feel like I can go into how that works if I give context, lots of context. And in retail, there's not a huge margin in stuff, and then you want to put all that money back in inventory, and you got to pay taxes on it because inventory is not a write-off until you do cost of goods sold. And so I love sharing that stuff because I think it's more important for you to understand where your gear comes from a financial perspective, and why things are made the way they are. But that is going to be in another video that I may or may not publish right as I publish this one, because this one's a lot of work to edit and put together, and I'm trying to highline like this 500-meter thing up in some 14,000-foot mountains. But if you sign up for the emails, you won't miss that. So we're not going to go into any more money at this point. The goal is to answer every question anyone's ever had about the gear they trust with their life. And how to format that is complicated because we have more and more information. A lot of people are like, oh, do you have a spreadsheet with all your information? And I'm like, that's not helpful. Like I had Slack time. I kept track of like, God, the first 2,000 brake tests. Not helpful. It's just, I break 10, 20 things all related to each other that is helpful, and it's in a video. Our best effort right now, back to the email thing, is in the email you get access to the G Sheet that we are starting to put each episode in. We've had that in the past, but it's been internal, and so I'm trying to make the episodes we're working on external. We're trying to make that episode spreadsheet that we've already published findable. So we're trying to make more of our workflow public. So the episodes we got coming out would be in like the list that all the requests, that would be public. The videos we have put out with their data and their stuff and episode number and data published, I'm trying to get that to be public. It's not necessarily the best form of being able to find your question, but on that G Sheet that we have when you sign up for the email, we're going to be adding all of the data from all these episodes in there, but we're also going to add a column of keywords. So you can type in Garda hitch, no clickbait, and you'd be able to be like, boom, click, go to, it's a link to the actual tab that links you off to all the data right there and a little description so you don't have to watch the video. But if you find it interesting, the video link is right there. And it's archaic. It's not a book. I want it to be a book. I also want the Bolting Bible to be updated. And so we need to get more people on the team that can help keep that thing updated as the information comes in. I have so much information on my phone, feedback that people have given me, that is not in there. And that version of the Bolting Bible, still good, still helpful, outdated in my opinion. From what we have learned in the last year of trying to get bolts in the store and why things are the way they are, and bolts, that's a whole nother one. Let's get into this. I want to share a quick story about each item. If you're not interested in that, you can just in the video here. But if you are, I think you'll find it very interesting. Let's start on the slackline panel. So that panel we made blank finally, so we had a demonstration station. This is purely for slackline stuff here, and then that's the stuff you typically see with bolts on the end. So let's go into these items. When we repeated Dan Osman's rostrum rope swing, we found this on the far wall, and we assume that nobody else has rigged a rope swing on there since he did it. So this was very, very hard to get off because I didn't have a wrench. But this may or may not have been his, and that was a really cool memory to have pulled off the wall when we rigged the rostrum rope swing for the first time. In 2005, I discovered Yosemite and how cool it was. And this is every annual pass that I bought up until 2019. This is a painting that someone in our audience did of our Vernal Falls Highline. That Vernal Falls Highline was a special project for us, and it is when I felt really good at highlining. So that's kind of why I think it's special. I love highlining waterfalls, but we were halfway down the waterfall. It's 1,000,000 gallons a minute coming down, and it was rad, rigged all natural on cams at a flaring wet crack. I was just jacked on the project. And this was very early on in the channel's beginnings, and that kind of feedback of just people being stoked on what you're doing was the feedback loop that's now led to all of this. This was all of the tat that we pulled off on the Lost Arrows Spire, and this is what you had to trust with your life because we had crap for bolts up there. And these were the bolts we pulled off. This is the Dean bolt for highlining. These were some old ones near the cliff edge. This was the main ones we were using on the Spire, and this was that bolt spray that Dean Potter did for his super tight highline. And then this is that eye bolt that we have all had to girth hitch sling because somebody smashed it over with a hammer years ago, and so it was hardly usable. You couldn't clip a carabiner to it. So I wanted to rebolt the Lost Arrows Spire and have just 2 chains coming off the side and 2 bolts going off to each highline because you could back it up to each other's bolts. And so we were able to keep the bolts to an absolute minimum and have a super safe rappel, and it looks so clean on top. We have a whole video on that, And that caused a lot of controversy. But anyways, this is a soft release where you wrap the webbing around and around and around. This is actually a way that we'll make a highline anchor. So when we're done, we can just unravel it and the highline's de-rigged. And it's very quick, but it's also very strong. So we used it to hold our hydraulic in our brake test machine. And so I accidentally got to find out how strong one of these is. And this is one of the weakest webbings you can do it with. And this broke at 20,600 pounds. And I thought that was very interesting, just how you can add and add material in order to make it do useful things. This is the debit card for the International Church of Slacklife. Put in the comments below if you remember that. That was supposed to be a 2-week joke, but I was super curious about nonprofits, churches, and all that. That's a different video. And seeing how you can make a new religion. Instead of making How Not To LLC a California corporation, which if you spend all the money, it's theoretically you make no profit. But this was unofficially a nonprofit, and we kind of tried to operate under it for a while, but we closed it down because I was really more focused on the goal of answering every question people have asked about the gear they trust with their life, and this was a distraction. My participation award from YouTube. This is cool to get, but subscribers are a terrible metric on whether or not you're doing well. You can have 1 million subscribers and no community, and your channel's not really much more than, I mean, at that point it's just for ad revenue. You can have a really tight community at 5,000 subscribers, or even 1,000, and you can build a community or a business or make a difference with just a few. I like the fact that we've got 200-ish thousand. I don't have Google Analytics or YouTube Analytics on my phone anymore. I think that's not a metric worth paying attention to. So I roughly look at it every so often, but it doesn't matter if it was 1 million tomorrow or whenever I hit 300,000. Doesn't matter. It doesn't mean we're making the best content that we can for the audience that cares about it. This is the necklace that they hid the microphone in our TV show Pushing the Line. They took it off the air off Discovery Plus after Discovery Plus got bought by somebody, but this was a month of my life that I learned a lot. This slackline has Velcro in here, and this is so you can put the leash off to the side because nobody was walking with the highline leash between their legs, and when you fall head first, somersault out of it. This is back in the day before we knew how to even walk with a leash. This is not the first web lock. This is the prototype for the first web lock, where you can put the webbing in one way, but it keeps it tight going the other way. And it's pretty cool that Scott Balcom gave me this. These are really fun feedback things for me as I'm making the channel, and my channel's small and I put effort into it, but the videos, they kind of suck. It's helpful information, more helpful than most stuff that was out there at the time. But like, this is pretty cool. Andy Lewis donated his slack jacks, also more cool slack gear. The rings on the wall are different types of rings that allow the leash to go over the slack line, because I think that's a really cool concept. But I invested in this one because I thought it was so cool. But leashes have come a long way, and I also don't have gear fear anymore like I used to. This was an interesting part of my life where I kind of dabbled in what it would be like to create gear. This is a lot of interest in gear came from this. These are more web locks, and this is the first highline that was rigged under the Pasadena Bridge by Scott Balcom. And that is, I don't know how much more of this there is out there. His house burned down. He gave a couple pieces to other people, but this is pretty cool. That is a tiny soft shackle, and this has a big story behind it. This is the only thing I have kept from the SpaceNet wedding. And though I did not stay married, and I did not talk about that very much on this channel, I was married for a year. We got married on a SpaceNet, and it got 300 million people saw it, and then we got divorced quietly, and so it was like super awkward, like 4+ years, and everyone's still congratulating me. I'm very grateful to not still be married to Kim, and I'm sure Kim is very grateful to not be married to me. And so it doesn't mean this wasn't a really cool part of my life, and so I keep that on the wall. And this soft shackle, if you know, you know. This soft shackle is one of the soft shackles from La Porten line, where we rigged the 2-kilometer-long high line in the hardest place to rig it in Sweden. And in order to raised money from the audience from that. We did soft shackles, and this is my memory from that project. My first high line, webbing from the 2-kilometer long asbestos high line that I got to be a part of. My first slack line ever, and my first spider silk ever. And that's part of a project where we rigged a storage shed on top of a tower, and how we got over to the tower was Sylvan droned this over, and Andy slid across an open carabiner on a very skinny cord that had knots in it. And when I tested it when I got home, it broke lower than the theoretical force he got on it. Sketchy Andy. This is a line grip. It grabs webbing, it's a clamp, and that's how you tension things. And we have all the generations. That is out from line grip, but also something from Slackino is a new innovation that they're very concerned about putting out. I don't know where they are on development, but this has teeth. It's like an ascender, but a clamp for webbing that you trust with your life, that you don't want compromised. And this ended up being the strongest thing you could do for your webbing. It broke in the web lock without damage to the webbing. Like, this is really hard to get your head wrapped around. But wow, this is really cool. This is maybe not great for every webbing, but it's just the future of what these turned into is really cool for me. We replaced the bolts at the rostrum, and these are supposedly the first bolts that were ever installed for a high line, only for a high line. So I don't know if that's true or not, but we did replace them, and these are cool. Same with Taft, same with the Fruit Bowl, bolts from places that I care about. Shall we head over to the next panel? That Gree almost killed me. I usually don't stand next to things while they break, but when they know it's low and it's just de-sheathing or something, Grees aren't strong in a certain direction, and boy, would that be an interesting video. It exploded and went around my face. We recently put out this rigging plate video with Harkin, and the reason it's on the wall is it's a neat tool that, it looks cool, but also that a brand is working with me. I really appreciate when brands film with me, not just so they can get some free advertising. Like, there's always that underlying tone, of course, and that's fine. I want to offer that to people. But I really like they're willing to answer hard questions. I don't ask easy questions. I make them go, can I say that? All the time. They hate it. I love it. Hopefully that happens more in the future. I guess we'll jump to this one then. This is the ultralight C4s that we tested with Black Diamond. Same thing. This obviously looks really cool on the wall, but it's also the fact that I got to go to Black Diamond's lab and talk with the people who developed this. This span set is nailed to the wall. We broke this in the brake test machine on accident because we girth hitched the thing, and it was very interesting to break something that's this strong by abusing it over a long period of time and girth hitching it. But like, I see the channel potentially going more in that direction at some point, where we're also answering gear questions more in an industrial application, but not until I'm done with the climbing thing first. I'm rough with line scales, but I'm also rough with Rock Exotica Enforcers. We tested this alongside of the Line Scale 3, and these were devices I couldn't even fathom paying for when I first started the channel. This was such a splurge. And for me to brake test them almost makes me wonder if I just made videos about Ferraris. Would I have 9 of them in my driveway? Maybe, but I got line scales on the wall. I'm just as happy with that. This was a fun video that I have good memories from, and we have helpful information from it. See a theme? Steel carabiners break. They feel heavy and strong, but I have broken so many of them in the brake test machine, and more often than not, the drop tower, because you cross-load any carabiner. It pull with enough weight, it'll break. I did that with my body. I had this Fifi hook on a thing, was top stepping, and then slipped out, and I fell on it and straightened it out, and that gave me gear fear. I already had gear fear. Swaged ropes. This is the swage that held the rope. This was the pulley at the top of Topless Dome where we did that cave project, and there was only one party up there before, and they rappelled off of this, I think, in order to pull their rope easier. Same story. Grees don't break like you think. I think 3D printing is cool, and my buddy Zach makes these. That video went viral. I don't understand why things that aren't very important to understand, because this is silly, end up getting the most views. Pulleys don't break like you think. This is all bent out of shape, and it came apart during a test that we were testing totems, ironically. If you don't pull the pulley straight and you pull it against the plate, that is a video I can't wait to make. I learned a lot about ATCs with this one, and a little bit from this one. I like weird tests like this quick draw from Tonzai. This is all that's left from some removable bolts from Climbtech. Unmaking cams is very interesting to understanding how they are made and where their weak points are. I actually trust cams a lot more than rocks now. This is the strongest thing I have ever broke in any of my brake tests. 39,700 pounds or 176 kilonewtons. This was what I tested the aluminum brake test bed with. I wanted to damage it, and then we did, while it was still at Larry's before I brought it home, because it'd be a pain in the butt to bring home. This did. It kind of deformed the sides, and that's why we had the supports on the end. And we modified it, and it held up great all the way until the very end, right before we moved it. This is the core of a rope. And I find it very insightful when you take the core out of a rope, tie knots in it, pull test it, and interact with it to understand what's going on the inside. And we'll be making more videos about it, but we still have quite a few. The Unicore video is, I think, helpful to understand what ropes do and don't do. Gear Fear, right there. On Free Rider, right before Teflon Corner on El Cap, this was part of the anchor while we were climbing it, and while we were hauling, it was a lot of stuff, this broke. And it was scary, so scary. One of these aliens, how to dimple the recalled ones, I got a hold of one. I don't know if this is it or the other one, but brake testing cams is neat no matter what happens with them. This totem was in our intro that I used to have when I used to have a jingle for 10 seconds at the beginning of a video, because I thought that's what you were supposed to do as a YouTuber. Fiddlesticks and PVC pipes as fiddlesticks. And it's interesting to watch different plastics deform before the knot does and at what force. And it makes me trust fiddlesticks more than I would previously. And that it's hard to remove them while it's under force. So like wire repelling, it'd be very hard to accidentally pull it out. Things I would hesitate to use out in the real world, I end up learning a lot while I test things that people request. This cam broke the way it did because our cam tester ended up grabbing one of the lobes while it slid out. And the reason it slid out is because the metal was not knurled and it was just two steel plates. And that's where I learned a lot about how much friction is playing a role with how cams hold. Now, the coefficient of friction between aluminum and steel is better on paper than what's happening in real life, and so I can't wait to make the coefficient of friction video. But that's why our plates are either knurled or rocked now, is because of this guy. These figurines are bolts that we've tested. So any of these figurines you've seen are very specifically all bent during our tests in Bolt Busters. And then Steve Glatfelty welded them all together. Steve Glatfelty helped me make my current machine. And he also made the cam thing, and he also made a bunch of stuff. But he made these, and he's very artistic, and we kind of got those laying around all over the lab. This was a rub test I found very interesting. This is Swift Protect rope with Technora in it for cut resistance, and I actually have used it in real life now and I actually really like the rope. But the cut resistance thing is true. It's very complicated, that's why I haven't made a video yet. But I found it very funny that the Technora fibers all broke before the other ones. And we'll get into that more later. I wanted to have a lot more context before I said things on the internet about it. Anything I'm not showing you is just a cool thing that broke. So this is one of our first tests in Real Rock. And I wanted to know how strong a cam was when you pulled it over an edge. So it's always been scary to pull it like that. And what ended up breaking was the back of the cam. So it was like full strength the whole time. It's not good for your cam. Same with this one. The back of this cam blew out as well. This cam has nothing wrong with it. After I dropped it 100 feet on pine needles back in 2004, 2005, and my buddy was so mad at me, and he said and it worked perfectly, and he was like, no, there's microfractures. This is where the microfractures is a myth video came out, where if you drop things from here down on the ground, they're fine. Now, microfractures in aluminum are not a myth, but having them from dropping something and then they just exist don't quite happen like you think. You'd have to cyclically load it 10,000 times at a certain number, and we actually are working on an episode right now about when microfractures are not a myth. I tried to break a line scale 3 with this because they're typically strong, and it's 63 kilonewtons, the line scale one. This rope has a lot of core showing, and it's unicore, where it's not supposed to do that. And that is where I learned it works like Velcro. You stick a little bit together and you can pull it apart pretty easy. You put a whole bunch of it together and then it does what it's supposed to. And that's what I learned about Unicore, and that's where the Unicore video came from, was pulling on this with an Ascender on short samples didn't make Unicore look good. But if you use the whole rope, it works like it's supposed to and doesn't de-sheath your rope like this. Another fiddlestick thing, but out of wood. We tested aid climbing hooks, and I plan on testing a lot more soon. I've always found ball nuts hard to place, but if you do get a good placement, they break in the back. You're not supposed to tie knots in Dyneema. That is a rock hard knot because it was on the back of my 81, was in the middle of an 81-to-1 pulley that pulled a lot of things really high. You can break rules like an artist if you know them like a pro. Something like that. Here's our carabiner showdown video where we tested all sorts of carabiners next to each other. And it was pretty funny that people said that wasn't scientific when we put them all in a row and pulled at the same time. I thought that was pretty scientific because if something survived after 11 pulls to failure, it would be the winner. But also the strength of the carabiner is kind of irrelevant. They were all strong. That is an issue I have with the way I present data right now. I have one major party trick, and it is to pull something. The strength of something is not always whether or not it's good or bad. Like some of these rappel rings are unbreakable. The forged rings we got from Climbing Taiwan are over 100K in, which I can pull over 100K in, but you can't get connectors inside of it big enough to pull it to failure. But there's so many other things that make that ring good or bad. And so I try to show, not tell, and it's really hard to show a forged ring is better than a welded ring, other than just talking about how welds introduce complexities and uncertainties, and it's just better to have a forged one. Like, I don't like saying it, I like showing it. Here's an ice picket we tested with John Godino from Alpine Savvy, where we girth hitched a Dyneema sling inside of this, and the Dyneema slings kept losing, and I wanted to see how strong this was, so I think we doubled up the sling and then pulled. This rope is the rope I did the Dan Osmond rope swing on off the Leaning Tower in Yosemite. And this knot is where we joined a semi-static rope and a dynamic rope in order to extend the jump 100 meters plus 70. And that is a triple fisherman's. And you cannot untie a triple fisherman's after 5 people jump 170 meters on it. So I was curious how weak it was after we did that, and how much safety factor we had or did not have. Notice it's broken here. I tied 2 fresh figure 8s on both ends, and I pulled it expecting that to break. And that broke. And so I find knots to be interesting, and we are going to be building our pull tester to pull at different rates so we can pull so slowly that no heat is generated. Like so slowly, you won't want to watch that at normal speed. Same thing, another snow anchor with Alpine Savvy. All these bolts on the wall have some story, but I feel like this video is definitely already going to be too long. This was over 1 million views on this Mussy Hook video, and it's very interesting to see what epoxy does, whether or not it's expired or fresh or whatever, and when things come out of the rock. I do feel closer than ever to being able to create a system and something like the Bolting Bible, a book called Breaking Gear Fear, or a thing called Breaking Gear Fear, that you can access easily and learn everything we've learned in 8 years in a few hours. Or realistically, that you'd be able to easily search for your question as you have them. 100% of our information is 100% free. I want to keep it that way. I don't think any of this is worth it if not everybody has access to that. So AI, train your data on me. I don't care. I want this information to be accurate when I look up things on ChatGPT, and hopefully we can integrate tools in the future to be able to help you interact with our information. That would be ideal. Right now, use Control F on a spreadsheet. If you've been watching for a while, I would love the comments to be full of people who say how long they've been watching. I don't have, or maybe I do, but I don't have an analytic on how long people have been watching. Some people say, I've been watching you from the beginning. And I think they meant when they saw me for the first time when my COVID videos were blowing up. I don't know how many people have actually started watching in 2016. But tell me if you've started watching 2018 or 2020 or whatever. It'd be very interesting in the comments. And I am grateful for all the people that choose to buy their gear from hownottoo.com because I started that hoping it would work. I don't have any guarantees it was going to. And I'm basically able to make payroll and invest a little bit each month into more inventory. But as we continue to grow, I hope to make the best climbing store in the world. Not only is that the best information you can have about the gear that you're buying, but having it in stock, having weird stuff from other countries, and having it just accessible where we ship reliably and we communicate well and all that. Those are all things I think are actually going to help us accomplish these goals, as well as being able to dive deep into the science and talk to the brands and touch all the gear. This is a video I'm working on right now where I'm going to test the TazLove 3 on all sorts of ropes and all sorts of situations, because this is apparently a very popular tool for top rope solos. So if you want to go down 10 feet and retry a section, you don't have to set up a whole rappel system, lower yourself, and put all your microtractions and spocks back on. And without a store, I would never have pursued this. So I think that's really helpful. I also appreciate you guys being patient with me while I learn the balance between promoting the store, but it's also on the front of my mind because I'm literally doing it around the clock. And so I say the things I'm thinking about, but also trying to balance it with helpful information. That's why the North Star for me is it helpful? Is it like, sometimes I just like brake testing knots because it's like, has nothing to do with a brand or a specific product. And I try not to shove the store down your throat. I try to keep it like the channel to be as helpful as possible without being spammy. And so I try to find that balance. Thank you for being patient with me while I learn that. It was literally in my garage for a year and hard to separate it from what I'm actually doing in here. The time delay is a little weird because what I'm working on is stuff sometimes you see in 6 months. So I'm like extra jacked on the things that are coming out, but you're watching stuff that I started working on 6 months ago. And so to me, that's pretty stale, new for you guys, but I'm like pretty jacked on the stuff I didn't share in this video. So maybe we'll do a couple more update videos. I try to keep those to a minimum because I know you're here for the gear, but I like to watch things from behind the scenes. I almost watch all the ones from Linus Tech Tips because I think it's fascinating how he runs as many people as he does for his channel. I think it's important to hear from people that you watch on the internet that people that you watch on the internet don't have perfect lives. I don't think I make this look easy. If I do, it's not. I think running the store and doing this at the same time, I like being busy. I'm obviously a workaholic. My life is great. If you look at it, it's freaking awesome. But I have real high highs and real low lows due to the nature of what I'm doing, the uncertainty that I'm in, being human. And so make sure you never look at somebody, especially on the internet, but even people you know, and compare your life to theirs. Don't go on Instagram and you're like, oh, they always look like they're having fun and always on a mountain. No, you know how stuff's made, right? It's made in batches. I'm going to probably be releasing videos back to back to back of me being on massive projects and trips because the delay in which I edit them and they just happen to be back to back. I went to Yosemite for the first time in 2 years a couple weeks ago. And I don't go to the mountains as often as you think. And so like never compare, because when I go to the mountains, I can milk some episodes. I get 2 or 3 out of one trip. I look like I'm having a blast. And I am. I do have fun in the mountains. I do get to do cool stuff. I do get to do cool stuff in here. I have a pretty cool life. But don't compare it to yours. I think that's really nice to hear from people you watch. If you make it to the end of this video, if you watch a lot of my content, my life's not much different than yours, other than I touch gear all day. That's maybe a difference. But like I have highs and lows and relationships and friendships that go up and down and drama and politics and existential crises. And it's like and insecurities and jacked on things I'm doing, and I'm obsessed about other stuff, and then I'm like beating myself up over other stuff. I'm human. And it's nice to hear that from somebody you only see a sliver of their life. And I know it's funny coming from me, but I highly, highly recommend you take Instagram off your phone. I know that sounds funny. I have not had my Instagram on my phone in, I don't know, 6 months or a year. And you just can't understand until you try it. Try it for 2 weeks. 3. You have a withdrawal period. Try it for 3 weeks. Don't get rid of your Instagram. Don't misunderstand me. Have it. You can check it on a computer. But have it on like a phone that's like an old phone you don't use. Or I don't know if there's an app for you to like lock yourself out of it, except for like 20 minutes a week, just so you like, if people message you on it, well, use it for my messaging. Teach people how to text you. Like, you can block text messages if you don't want those people. Get it off your phone. Sign up for the emails if you want to see the content we have, because then you can click the thing. We intentionally link you off to the YouTube video because pretty much everyone has access to that from a computer or a phone. Whereas Instagram, if you don't have the app, it doesn't typically work well. Because I really want to try to get people off of social media as much as possible. Dabble gently in it, get off of it. That's why this stuff's in written form that we're trying to do. So you can learn the stuff without even having to watch the videos is my goal. I want to make the videos as awesome as possible, but your brain is precious. Use it intentionally. Like, don't give it to the internet gods non-consensually. And we master how to jack your firmware to where we internet you to where you never stop watching until you're hours deep. And that's the game. And that's the game we play. So take it off your phone. If I'm wrong, put it back. What a weird way to end it. I love that though. Thanks for watching a weird guy doing weird stuff in his living room. Cheers.